Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today's Monday. It is June the 30th, last day of the month, running right into the 4th of July week. And I hope we have an interesting show put together for you today. Some tragedy for sure. We're going to be discussing the situation out in Kootenai County, Idaho, where there was a shooting north of Coeur d'Alene, out in the woods. Of a terror from the tree line sort of situation. We'll play you some of the 911 footage or calls. We're going to play you the dispatch from the firefighters when they were caught. This was resolved with the shooter being shot dead or killing himself. Hard to say right now. Still waiting on more details coming out of that. But it is an interesting reminder that you don't have to just be in an urban area to face an overwhelmingly terrifying threat, that it could come from anywhere. It's a reminder that you are responsible for your own safety. You guys should probably be carrying a weapon system. If you don't know how to do that, now's a great time. Maybe 4th of July weekend as we celebrate freedom, independence from a king. Take it on yourself. Take on that responsibility of being an armed citizen. Start getting it right. If you're not doing it already. Many of you already are. All right, before we get into any of the stuff there, we're going to talk about the big, beautiful bill. We're going to talk about a socialist, democratic socialist. I love that they put the word democratic in front of the word socialist. I don't know why, but mainstream media insists on using a democratic socialist, as in they don't want to just like grab everything and do a government central authoritarian thing, which is what they want to do. They just want to vote for that and then do it. Anyway, kind of an interesting distinction. A couple of examples of Donald Trump was right. Kind of fun. The things that he tends to be right on are often related to the economy. They're often related to his predictions on foreign policy and the way that he manipulates other countries or works with them. I thought that was kind of good. So I've got some kind of like some good checks on that as well. You know, kind of a mixed bag of information that's going on out there in the world. And Democrats are still not really sure what they want to get behind. This Democrat socialist energy is exciting, but how do you sell that to the millionaires and the billionaires when the guy says the billionaires shouldn't even exist? You know, kind of Bernie Sanders style. So we'll get into that. Before we do, let's talk about something that is the opposite of billionaires and the opposite of democratic socialists. It's my friends over at Patriot Coolers. They are capitalists. You know, they believe in turning out a good profit, and then you pay them for it, and then you get to have it. Kind of that voluntary transaction. This doesn't happen in a socialist society. Patriot Coolers, the website, KYLE, the promo code. Save yourself 10% if you guys want to go buy them. Today's Patriot Cooler on the desk is a 20-ounce cooler. This is the one we took to church. It's kind of low key when you go into downtown Austin. My family has recently started going down that way. If you're going to go to downtown Austin, you don't want things that look kind of showy. So this is actually the same exact color as the interior of our minivan. Fun little note. If you want to get the dark gray, it looks perfect inside your Honda Odyssey. Yeah, that's a little pro tip from us. If you guys want a great product, great company, they support American veterans. They understand what it's all about. They make a patriotic looking product, and it also has all patriotic packaging. Actually, they have some of my favorite packaging. I always want to hold on to their boxes because they're red, white, and they're blue. Even the way that they design their product, there are 13 bars on here. There are 50 stars on the bottom, which I guess I could show it to you like this. You guys can see it right there. They're right in the glare of the light. Boom. They make it so that they remind you that this is a patriotic sort of thing that you're buying and not the alternative, not some Yeti, not some Stanley, not some other nonsense. Check them out. They're our longest sponsor. They have been keeping the Kyle Seraphin Show on the air since the beginning, going back to February of 23. Really appreciate them, and a happy 4th of July to the folks at Patriot Coolers. If you guys want to ring in the freedom and the fireworks and all of that with a new cooler that you're going to be using for many years to come, check it out. It says Patriot right on the front. It says Patriot right on the lid when you lift it up. Lets everyone know what you're all about. All right. Let's get into this today. Let's get into it. And by the way, link in the show description there. Let's start with today, and we're going to deal with the big, beautiful bill right up front. I probably could actually just like I could probably talk about product stuff like all day long. My favorite products are my favorite things. If people ever get me cornered in reality, like you find out, they're like, hey, like is that a gun belt? And it's like, oh, you want to know about my gun belt? Like, I'll tell you about all the things that I own and the story behind them and why I have them and what I paid for them and how, that's the kind of thing that I remember. It's like a very masculine thing. It's the opposite of what I found women talking about. They talk about like the relationship and their relationship to a thing. Like, I'm about the thing. Anyway, speaking of the thing, let's talk about this big, beautiful bill, which has divided both Republicans, it has divided Democrats, and it is disappointing at the very minimum. Donald Trump aims to change the nation and further cement his power as a deadline looms for the big, beautiful bill. This is coming from CBS News. And okay, so this is going to be a marathon, what everyone keeps referring to as a vote-a-thon. First of all, over the weekend, Chuck Schumer insisted that the Senate read the bill in its entirety. And this was a big controversy, that they actually read the 900 plus pages of this bill out loud. I don't know why it was a controversy. It was not clear to me what was controversial about that. It's probably the first time anybody actually read the damn thing cover to cover. But of course, nobody sat in there and listened to it. Senate's expected to kick off what is referred to as a marathon session on Monday after the chamber debated the president's massive tax bill into the wee hours of the morning as Republicans worked to pass the centerpiece legislation, Mr. Trump's second term agenda. The House narrowly passed it last month, and Senate Republicans have been working to put their mark on the legislation, treading carefully so as to not throw off the delicate balance in the lower house. The House will then need to approve the Senate's changes before the bill can head to the president's desk to be able to sign. There's a self-imposed deadline of July the 4th to get this measure signed. So, a couple things that were in here that have been removed. One of them is good. There was an opportunity to sell land, public land, and I guess it was being championed by Based Mike Lee. You guys know him. He is the senator from Utah. And Based Mike Lee had to issue the following statement. Over the past several weeks, I've been listening to a lot of members of the community and local leaders and stakeholders across the country. While there's been a tremendous amount of misinformation, in some cases outright lies about my bill, this was a bill selling off land that the American people owned, many people brought forward sincere concerns. And because of the strict constraints of the budget reconciliation process, I'm unable to secure clear, enforceable safeguards to guarantee that these lands would be sold only to American families and not to the Chinese, not to BlackRock, and not to any foreign interests. And for that decision, or for that reason, I've decided to withdraw the federal land sales provision from the bill. There's more to it if you guys want to go to his Twitter and read it. So political pressure works, and it works on these people. These people who, if they hear enough constituents clattering about the things that they don't like, then you'll get things withdrawn. That was a really awful provision, selling off the private lands. Interestingly enough, the claim was that it was going to go to benefit these large, like, landholding entities, again, BlackRock and Vanguard and some of these other sort of investment areas that would be able to go in and throw big money in and buy federal land. You'll be shocked to find out that one of the top donors to Mike Lee's campaign is BlackRock. That's what I found in Open Secrets. You guys can check that and see if that's the case that you found it as well. But when I went looking yesterday or the day before, the Open Secrets were pretty clear that that was a major six-figure donor to his campaign. It does make you kind of think about who are these people serving? What interests are they serving? One of the sort of conciliatory things that we were going to get out of the big, beautiful bill was we were going to get a kind of a step back, a rollback of our firearms rights. It was going to come back to the people. They had added something called the Short Act and the SAFE Act. These were provisions that removed suppressors from the National Firearms Act of 1934. And the reason why that they were able to touch that in the first place, this is a reconciliation thing, so it's supposed to only impact budget and taxes, is that there was a taxation associated with owning a suppressor. If you guys have never gone out and bought an NFA item, if you've never tried to, like, if you're not even a gun owner, then you don't know about this. And if you're a gun owner that's never bought an NFA item, it's always kind of been kind of scary and off-putting. For most of the time that I've been a gun owner, I did not own any of these items. At some point in time, one of my buddies, who's a prior Green Beret, just kicked me off. Actually, I think he's still like a reservist Green Beret. He kicked me off the ledge and he was like, just throw it in your cart and buy it and figure it out. And so I bought my first suppressors while I was an FBI agent. I bought 6 of them at the same time. If you guys have never done this process, it's actually way easier than you think. It gets easier every single year. And the reason why are companies like Silencer Central and Silencer Shop out of Austin and some other places that have really centralized the process and made it something that you can do. And $200 is a real pain in the ass to pay, especially when you're paying the government for the privilege of owning your own thing. And not only do you pay $200 tax stamp to the federal government, you still pay all of your state sales taxes. So whatever the sticker price is, it just jumps up and up and up, and you're really just paying for a bunch of stuff. At this point, I'm about $3,000 invested in tax stamps, which is awful because I literally paid the federal government for the privilege to own my own thing. And so they added this SAFE Act, which is the hearing protection part, or the Hearing Protection Act, I want to say, and they called it something else. And then the other one is called the Short Act, which was going to take what are called short-barreled rifles. These are rifles with a barrel length, and shotguns as well, that are less than 16 inches. You can also kind of fudge that a little bit with like a 14.5 if you have a long suppressor and it's pinned and welded and all this. But it was going to take all this stuff off the National Firearms Act and the registration. And so now people are kind of playing around with the idea, well, maybe we can just reduce the tax part of it. The reason they removed this from the bill, by the way, it happened in the Senate. It did pass the House with one of those. The Senate added in the second piece of it. I can't remember if it was cans or rifles, but they added both of them in the Senate. They were debating these things. And then the parliamentarian, who's supposed to be a referee on whether or not things are in and out of bounds, decided that it wasn't. And this is according to the Byrd Rule. And the Byrd Rule is this decision that if you were going to have a lesser number of votes, remember, our Constitution requires that you're supposed to have a 2/3 majority, and you're supposed to be able to get 60, close to 2/3, right? 60 are supposed to be able to vote to be able to pass anything out of the Senate. But they created this thing so that they could get budgets through, because it's so contentious how screwed up our omnibus bill systems are, that if they could just get 51 votes, then they'll be able to pass these budgetary reconciliation ideas. And so what we've seen, it was interesting. Aaron Stevenson sent me a little AI snippet, a paragraph today about the United States Constitution. And what it said is that the original delegates that created our Constitution, they spent less than 100 days debating and writing. It was a 4-month period, and they only met for less than 100 days. I think it was 89 total days. Might have been slightly more than that. But it was under 100 days to be able to put together the Constitution. And then we spent the last 200 years dismantling it for all practical purposes. So it's kind of interesting to me that the one thing that the parliamentarian, I really hate that term, decided is that this does not fit into the accepted rules for reconciliation, and therefore we couldn't get the thing that firearms owners were really most interested in. You're going to turn off a lot of gun owners and buyers. I would rather look in the eye of the enemy. Democrats that think that they should outright ban our ability to own these things, I would rather look them in the eye and know that they're my enemy than like suggest that there's a Mike Lee who's going to try to sell off our lands to one of his big donors, that we're going to deal with a Tom Tillis who's going to go out there and backdoor it out. This was always, I'm sure, the plan, by the way, folks. The inclusion of these things, it wasn't going to pass reconciliation, not under the Byrd bill, or not under the Byrd Rule as it's written, as I understand it. And I've had a couple of attorneys reach out and kind of tell me the same thing, that this was always sort of like obvious. It was red meat for the base and then pull it out in the last minute. And the reason, by the way, that the parliamentarian removed it from the ability of the Senate to be able to pass this along, it's really simple. It's because the fundamental nature of the National Firearms Act of 1934 and the tax stamp that goes along with these controlled items, it's regulatory in nature and not revenue and taxation based. Isn't that interesting? You can read the plain text of the Second Amendment and know that you're not supposed to infringe. And I would say, in all reasonable person's mind, a regulation is an infringement. And so when they did this stuff, it's so clear that that was the intention. But the parliamentarians' ruling should actually lead to a constitutional question of whether or not it's even constitutional to do any of this stuff. In any case, I've got Tillis, Senator Tillis' statement. He obviously is having a difficult time getting this thing through, and this is going to end up ending his political career. It sounds like he may have been offered a position in private industry. He's going to go and leave. So he made an announcement over the weekend that he's not going to run for re-election. So you've got a Senate election that will happen for his seat after 18 months when he's done. There's a couple others that probably need to announce as well. But it is the big problem with these massive, quote unquote, omnibus bills. I found a little clip of Tom Massey. Some of you guys like him. I do. Some of you don't like him. You think he's ineffective. That's okay too. This discussion of what is the real problem, I think we can actually agree on, which is that when you've lumped in all of this crap, you're going to lump in whether or not we're going to tax suppressors, along with whether or not we're going to fund Medicaid for the states for various things, that you're going to put military funding and all this other nonsense. You're going to put 950 pages worth of federal legislation under one single vote. Then you're always going to find things that people are going to say, well, I had to vote for that crap bill because otherwise they're going to crucify me about this other thing. And what we've really seen is that most members of Congress don't seem to have any principles. I get that that could be problematic for folks when they look and say, well, this guy is not effective. But you need to have ideological grounding. I listened to Matt Gaetz the other day, and he actually made a great point. Trump's bill does some things. There's some things that we would like in it. There's some, funding for Border Patrol and deportations and all this other stuff, and that's great. And at the same time, you have to have a balance. That is the whole point of the debate that goes on in Congress. You have to have a balance where some people are ideological forces that do not bend, so that the party doesn't completely lose access to the anchor. Massey's explaining the way that they leverage a lot of these people and quote unquote put them over the barrel. And he's not wrong here, folks. It's frustrating to see that is someone that you're going to go and attack when the real problem is the same reason why the Matt Gaetz and company had a vacation of the seat, the speaker's seat, with Kevin McCarthy. In theory, we were supposed to get single item appropriation bills. In other words, Congress would take all of the monies that they wanted to appropriate to a single thing at a time, like whatever that goal or project was, and they allotted that money specifically. That's the hard work of doing the job of a legislator. It doesn't sound like fun. I'm not interested in doing that. I don't think many of you would be either, writing up funding bills individually and then passing them. So what they do is they skirt around this. They do theater. They do all of these stupid hearings that we continue to see. And then you get this kind of stuff where they all come together and go, well, crap, we have this deadline that we made up for ourselves and we all have to pass this. And by the way, screw you on the guns and screw you on the freedoms and screw you on the national debt forever, that kind of thing. So here's a little Massey clip. He's talking to Theo Vaughn. This may be a comedian, but I think they're talking about something that is it's graspable by most people.
I'll tell you right now, this would be 50% of solving the problem. Get rid of the giant bills, okay? The omnibus bills, the continuing resolutions, and even the big, beautiful bill.
Bring up omnibus bill. We looked it up the other day when Mr. Vance was here, but I just want to go over it again. An omnibus bill is proposed law that covers a number of diverse or unrelated topics. So it's not even really fair because you only get one vote on the bill?
Correct. What? And so typically an omnibus bill, it includes at least 12 other bills. Why not put that shit on the floor one at a time?
I agree.
And then that way, you can go to your representative or your senators and say, why did you vote for that? Right now, they can say, well, Theo, I had to vote for it. I had a pay raise for soldiers, right? They literally will put a pay raise for soldiers in every freaking giant bill so that if you vote against it, you have to go back home and watch TV ads that say he voted against a pay raise for the soldiers.
Right. Even though he may have voted for 90 other amazing things on the bill, right?
Right.
And that was one thing that was tied in there that if you went this way,
Yeah.
It may have been like oxygen for grandmothers, right?
Literally, there probably is that in there.
But if you vote for oxygen for grandmothers and they're not going to give. So I see what you're saying.
I voted against oxygen for grandmothers so many times they can't even run that ad anymore. It doesn't even seem real.
So the structure of the problem is really clear. It's that you have unelected people. This is going to be your staffers that are going to be sitting there and servicing the folks that are running it. You've got judges that are going to weigh in and all the other kind of things. You're going to say, well, this actually didn't pass legally. You're going to have lawsuits that are going to come in if somebody doesn't abide by the proper restrictions that they've imposed on themselves. And as you guys are correctly pointing out in the chat, yeah, the parliamentary can be overturned either by the Senate majority leader or could be overruled by the president of the Senate. Those are all real. Of course, that wasn't going to happen, though. because they didn't actually even put this thing in the first place. And by the way, no Democrats are going to vote for that thing if it were going to be standalone. Everything they want to do is to limit your individual freedoms, which is wild. It's wild. Do you remember growing up when they referred to the people on the political left as liberals, self-described liberals? They do the most illiberal things you can imagine. I don't understand where that word came from. In theory, they're talking about some sort of like social liberties, but those actually end up leading to like the lack of freedoms, and they are more than happy to restrict yours. Very strange. How about this other little thing? Speaking of unelected people like parliamentarians that are shutting things down, we had another little kind of interesting moment where the Supreme Court has decided to do something out of common sense that regular Americans could read in black and white and go, yeah, district court judges should not be able to impose nationwide injunctions. The issue is something kind of like about the certification of class. Most people who've ever been involved in a class action lawsuit, you've probably just gotten an email, or maybe you got something in writing in letters. I remember getting one from Columbia House back in the day. You guys remember they used to have like the CD of the month club or something like that? You'd go and you'd sign up and they would send you like 20 different punk rock CDs or 20 different like doo-wop 50s things, whatever. And I guess they were scamming in some way, shape, or form. So you would get a letter from the attorneys that had filed, that had certified as a class, notifying that you might be a member of the class, because they would take all of the different people that had bought CDs from Columbia House Records or whatever it was. And then you'd, fill out your little thing and you'd send it back to them and you'd get a check for like $9.37 because they sent it out to the millions of people. Right? Everybody got that. Now you get it via email, and they're like, you were part of the Apple whatever subscription service back in the 1973 or whatever. They would give you this thing. They would give you a time frame, and if you were a customer during those things, you may be eligible for part of the settlement, right? So the biggest part of that hurdle, and the biggest reason why these attorneys do it, is because if they can open up the pool of people that are affected and certify as a class. We're actually going through this with the FBI right now. FBI employees should be a class who were discriminated against in the COVID tyranny of the Biden era. It's pretty objectively clear that we would constitute a class, but you have to go through and certify, and there's all this rigmarole that goes with it. There's all this expense that the people who are the original class actors. I'm actually the I'm referred to as the class agent, because I am the classic case of all the things that were done wrong were actually done to me individually. So I represent the face of the class, so they can put my name on the front of it versus fill in the blank attorney general in the case of Garland. Now it'll be under Bondi, whatever, right? The issue with the nationwide injunction is that they basically assume class status for the country, that they are all going to be constituting a class without going through any of the issues of certifying as a class. And on Friday, the Supreme Court finally handed down a ruling, 6-3 ruling in favor of the Trump administration, one of his day one executive orders that effectively said that it would end birthright citizenship, which he probably can't do. But a district court judge can't make that decision, is what they've decided. Now, the real fireworks out of it came when they went and did some analysis back, not just like the what the end up result was. And everybody likes to know that district court, by the way, even the quote unquote liberals on the court, the leftists, they actually used to agree with this stuff, because district court judges were also imposing restrictions on the Biden administration. I was a beneficiary of one of those. And even that seemed ridiculous. There was a district court judge in the Southern District of Texas who ruled a nationwide injunction on the Biden vaccine mandate for all federal workers had to be put down. Not just the members of the people that were in the lawsuit, which I was one of those, not just the people who were affected inside the Southern District of Texas and the people in the lawsuit, that might be reasonable. No, nationwide. And that was eventually affirmed. It was denied by someone in the appeals court. Then it was denied again by I think a 3-judge panel. We have a real long process to get to these sort of rulings. And then finally it was put in front of an en banc review of the Fifth Circuit. And the Fifth Circuit sided with us being the federal employees, and said, yeah, we do think it. And by the time you get to a judge panel like that, that might be the top of the line. Most are not going to actually end up in front of SCOTUS. So, okay, fine. But the first district court that weighs in on it probably shouldn't actually rule on this. Now, we got kind of a fun little clip of this discussion. This is Fox News trying to cover down on this. The most interesting thing out of this was Amy Coney Barrett in the majority decision lambasting the dissenting opinion of not just Sotomayor, who came forward and wrote the dissent, but Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, or Ketanji Jackson Brown, whatever she goes by these days. wrote some of the dumbest nonsense that you've ever seen. And I was perusing some of the screenshots from her idiotic dissent. And the best is that she basically wrote it like a social media post. There were points in there where she said, ... wait for it. I shit you not. Like I'm flabbergasted that this dumb vessel is sitting there in that august court and making decisions that affect all of Americans. We essentially have one vote that will always side for the most retarded thing, because that's who she is. She's a dumb midget that sits on that court and says the stupidest possible things. I saw a compilation in just the last year of the number of times where she explained that she didn't understand the argument being made. And it's probably a rhetorical device. She was like, I don't think I understand your argument, or am I understanding your argument correctly? And then she says it wrong. There are like dozens and dozens and dozens of examples in just the last 18 months of her saying those on recording. She's also the most spoken of the Supreme Court justices. She speaks more than anyone else. It's pretty offensive because she's the most junior justice. She knows the least, quite obviously, and she writes things like a child. She was really excited. If you guys saw, we did a video where we showed she was on Broadway the other day. And when I say she's like a midget, she's like shorter than my wife. My wife is not even 5 feet tall. So anyway, this is Fox News talking about kind of the rip on it, and we'll continue to go onward. I'm gonna yeah, I'm actually flabbergasted with how stupid these people can be. And it just shows you that the people on the political left, particularly the presidents that have been appointing these people, Sotomayor used to have the crown of kind of like queen dummy, and this woman just displaced it without even trying. Here we go.
Justice Jackson wrote a dissent, and she said, I agree with everything that Justice Sotomayor said, but I have to add my own 2 cents to this thing. And boy, is it scorched earth. She goes on to say in her dissent, perhaps the degradation of our rule of law regime would happen anyway, but this court's complicity in the creation of a culture of disdain for lower courts, their rulings and the law as they interpret it, will surely hasten the downfall of our governing institutions, enabling our collective demise. She goes on from there, but clearly she sees this decision as something she obviously disagrees with, but as a very threat to the structure of our courts and our institutions as they now exist. I understand there is something that Justice Barrett said in the majority with respect to answering Justice Jackson's dissent. I'm trying to tick back to that. But also a reminder for folks, Justice Barrett was a law professor for a long time before she got into the world of being a federal judge. She also taught classes in civil procedure, which is one of the first things that I had my first year in law school. You get it as a first year student, but it gets to the heart of how things proceed, how the court system works. So it does make sense now that even being a more junior justice, why she would have written this opinion. And it gets to this opinion, a lot of those questions that you've heard our other panelists bring up here about certification of class actions. It takes a lot of work. It is not easy to do. And there are cautions throughout this opinion that district court judges not now simply default to that.
So here's another thing that's worth knowing. That's Fox News. They're actually doing legal analysis, God forbid. And you can actually hear the anchors. They get bored and they immediately want to pivot away. And they want to go to whatever like the controversial slap is, because they don't actually want to do like long-term analysis of anything that makes sense. I'm going to read you from Barrett's majority opinion. This is one of the more sort of like scorched earth, like smashes on Ketanji Jackson Brown's stupidity. Coney Barrett wrote this. Quote, Justice Jackson, however, chooses a startling line of attack that is tethered neither to these sources nor, frankly, to any doctrine whatsoever, waving away attention to the limits on judicial power as a mind-numbingly technical query. The Post, she offers a vision of the judicial role that would make even the most ardent defender of the judicial supremacy blush. In her telling, the fundamental role of the courts is to order everyone, to include the executive, to follow the law, full stop. And then she says this, basically saying that she's a retarded midget. We will not dwell on Justice Jackson's argument, which is at odds with more than 2 centuries worth of precedent, not to mention the Constitution itself. We observe only this. Justice Jackson decries an imperial executive while embracing an imperial judiciary. They also mentioned that she skipped over that part, which was a part that was part of the analysis that they had done and was part of the hearings and some of the evidence given forward, because analyzing the governing statute involves boring, quote unquote, legal ease. Absolute roast in judicial ways, in the way that they do. A nice way of saying this woman is probably too dumb to be sitting on this bench. They'll never say that because they all want to preserve the continuity of the actual Supreme Court. But at the end of the day, we're talking about a court that has such guaranteed ideological actors. It's 3 and plus. They all side together, all 3 of them. I don't think I've seen any of them ever dissent from each other. Guys, let me know if that's the case and why. Maybe one of them just went like farther to the left, but it's like they've chosen their politics, and they were chosen specifically for the way that they're going to vote on all things because they are in lockstep ideologically, and it's gross because they can't have a fair look at something like this, where in theory they would actually want to care about the one thing that they all swore to uphold, which is the Constitution. And we've even heard them debate. If you can debate what is a woman, you can probably debate what is words on a page that are pretty clear and black letter, which is why we're not going to get suppressors fixed, which is why you can't take these cases to. I've had conversations with attorneys that bring lawsuits on behalf of Gun Owners of America and a Firearms Policy Coalition and so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, we basically allowed our civil liberties to be eroded over and over again by a Congress that doesn't seem to understand what their oath is, and a judiciary that doesn't seem to have any sort of nuts to be able to stand up and do the thing that makes any sense. So, before we get any deeper into that, if you guys want to protect yourself from government and from big tech and from corporate America and from criminals and so on and so forth, you can check out my friends over at Silent. I actually brought the bag up here. I have the new E3 Everyday. I'm backing off the mic here. The Everyday Faraday backpack. This, I liked the way it looked when I was at SHOT Show. I love the way that it actually feels. Like I'm such a gear nut. This is now carrying all of my live streaming gear, and it has a laptop so I can actually take it on the road with me. It's got room for spare clothing in there. It fits a lot like a GoRuck if you've ever worn one of those. It's very modular and rectangular. Big fan. Fantastic product. Something that I'm excited about taking into the field with me and doing some trips with. If you guys have not checked them out again, check out my friends over at Silent. It's slnt.com/KYLE. That's the E3 Everyday Faraday backpack that I have. You've got Aaron there covering it. He's the owner of the company. He's showing you what it is. It has 2 individual Faraday spaces. It's got a spot for your sunglasses that's padded. It's really, really, really well thought out. If you're looking for an awesome product to be able to travel with, and you want to be able to keep your stuff away from like prying eyes and government agencies and people that might be able to grab access to, I don't know, all the technology that's constantly pinging out of all of your phones and your tablets and your this and that, the RF signals that are constantly coming out there can be blocked, and they're all blocked by these Faraday products made by Silent. Again, incoming and outgoing signals, they're what makes your device on the grid. If you want to make them invisible from the outside world, you can simply just drop them in, and then you just close the lid, and boom, I've got one sitting here on the desk for my phone so it doesn't ring during the podcast. Check them out. Great products, well made, well thought out, really well designed by people who actually probably carried a backpack before in their life. It's slnt.com/Kyle. They've got sleeves, they've got pants, they've got all kinds of other cool technologies. You should look into them. Save 15%, plus you'll get free shipping on qualified orders at slnt.com/Kyle. That's silent with no vowels.com/Kyle. Promo code Kyle, again, will save you that 15%. I just looked today. They've got the backpack on there that you can find, which is waterproof. And I've actually used my waterproof backpack walking through a rainstorm. And you never know that you're going to be psyched about having your undies be dry when you go through TSA until you have a waterproof backpack in a pouring rainstorm. And you're like, I'm too dumb to carry an umbrella with me, but I'm not too dumb to carry a waterproof backpack. In any case, let's get a little deeper into some of the other stuff on here. I wanted to also present this while we're talking about the judiciary, some things that are kind of like, I don't know, make a little bit of sense. This is the Justice Department pledging action. Finally, you're going to see people being defended in religious institutions, which is something that we've had a problem with historically. The DOJ was ignoring things like the FACE Act. Of course, they're going to couch it under the terms of terrorism, which may get into the end of our show today as we talk about this shooting, which we don't yet have a motive for in Idaho. This is a guy, the story here is talking about the Tree of Life Synagogue. That's what you're seeing on the screen. Justice Department, and specifically Harmeet Dillon in the Civil Rights Division of DOJ, said that they are going to be focusing on things that she refers to as a form of terrorism, attacks on churches meant to terrorize people, meant to deter people from going there and making everyone feel unsafe. There's a couple different examples of the Justice Department. They just secured a 25-year prison sentence for a guy out of Virginia who was convicted in targeting a Haymarket, Virginia church, which is just in the D.C. area on the outskirts there. Prosecutors found a written manifesto. He walked inside Sunday church services with handguns and magazines and ammunitions and knives, and he wanted to go and do that. A canister of bear spray in his nearby car. They also got a guy in Arizona who was doing the same sort of thing. He was planting backpacks inside of congregations inside of Arizona, in Colorado and California, and trying to basically like leave them in fear of an explosive device, which reminded me that nobody has caught the pipe bomber yet. So if you are going to go leave an explosive device somewhere, I'm not making this recommendation, but I did say it on social media earlier this weekend. There are places where you can safely apparently just leave a pipe bomb and never have to worry about anyone coming after you. That would be in Washington, D.C., one of the most surveilled cities in America. You can get away with doing that. But our DOJ is going to crack down on the people going after churches. That's good. My family and I started going to a little bit more traditional, we'll say, Latin Mass that happens down at the cathedral in Austin. And we went to a couple of different ones, an afternoon and a morning over the last 2 weekends. And there is something to be said about stepping back into that moment. But it also, and that moment means like when you walk into a mass where they're speaking Latin the way they did 1,000 years ago, the way they did 1,500 years ago, it does feel like you're connecting with a tradition. You should be able to be in that space and not be worried that someone is going to walk in and take pot shots or try to destroy the outside of the facility and spray paint it and so on. And that is something that disappeared over the last 4 years. If you guys have seen the violations of the FACE Act, I had somebody approach me and say like, you must approve of the Biden administration. Like, consider who you're talking to. One of the allegations that I made was that the FBI had completely targeted speech specifically, not just traditional Latin Mass, which has made me more interested in it. In fact, I think the FBI made a big mistake with that sort of infiltration attempt that they were putting out there, or the idea that you could mitigate white supremacy. By the way, not all white people when you go into the Latin Mass in Austin, Texas. Probably not the same anywhere. But the idea that you could mitigate white supremacy by putting sources into traditional Latin Mass parishes or traditional Latin Mass congregations, it's absurd. And what's the opportunity cost? The opportunity cost is like paying attention to, I don't know, like actual hate groups and actual a-holes doing stuff like this. If you follow the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate map to try to generate your cases, then you have an FBI that's serving like this ideological master and not the one that should be out there. In theory, we actually should be paying attention to like, what do bad people do? Did they break the law? It doesn't matter whether we like it or not. If they were burning down abortion clinics and we don't like abortion clinics, we still don't think that they should be going after that. So FACE Act violation, get them. But if they're going into a, let's say, Catholic church in San Francisco, California, like we saw in 2020 and 21, and they're disrupting and they're spraying spray paint, or they're scaring people, or they're stopping people from their ability to worship as defined by the statute, why were there no prosecutions? So at least Harmeet Dillon is doing a good job. I think she's one of the wins that has been in the Trump administration. And if you guys watched our episode 600 over the weekend, we had Ron Coleman talking about a couple of things that might actually stop a lot of this. And the simplest answer is, if we just had people dressing like grown-ups, it's hard to act like a complete buffoon and, run around with pride flags or try to chain close the doors of a church or graffiti things if you're wearing a suit and you look like a grown-up. So his answer to a lot of the stuff was like, maybe you just start trying to enforce some standards, which is to say, if we actually had shame and people could look like ridiculous fools, you'd go out there and realize that you look like a ridiculous fool, you can't be in public, and you're not taken seriously. Maybe these people would actually straighten their act up. Kind of an interesting thought. In any case, we're seeing that. Speaking of people that are not got their act up and do not have things serious, we got this guy going on still. And I think this might be one of my funniest and favorite stories of the last year. The story of Zoran Mamdani. I'm not from New York. And I don't actually care who's the mayor of New York, but I am fascinated with who might be the mayor when it's this guy. By the way, the woman that's standing to the right, if you're looking on the screen right now, has like a pretty deep cleavage cut. And for some reason, it feels like that's very immodest for a guy who's supposedly a traditional Muslim. Kind of funny to see he's willing to like bend the rules. So I don't know how good of a Muslim or how austere or practicing he is. But there's very, very amusing things about a man who steps forward and says we should not have billionaires in a city that gave us the current president, who's a billionaire, in a city that is full of multiple billionaires, in the center of American finance in many ways. There's a reason why the Southern District of New York and the New York field office is one of the more powerful, and it's one of the most important for white-collar fraud investigations because all the centers of finance are in New York. And this is a guy saying that we shouldn't have billionaires in that city or at all. And again, as I told you, they really key in on this idea that he's a democratic socialist. He's democratically in favor of taking your stuff. It turns out the founders of this country had some real strong theories on democracy and what you can and can't do, and why maybe democracy wasn't the right answer. They did think that the people should have a say, but sort of dispassionately and educated. And that was actually the key. I've got some fun little quotes from people like Alexander Hamilton, who were talking about that fundamental idea that if our population is educated, if they understand the nature of what it is that they want and what is being proposed, not a 950-page bill that nobody can digest, but something that you could go, hey, do you want this kind of money going to this kind of thing? And people would go, yay or nay, and my representative should answer accordingly. Then you're fine. Or you could just stuff it full of pork and nonsense and say you voted against, pay raises for soldiers like Tom Massey was indicating. Anyway, here is this guy discussing why we shouldn't have billionaires. Of course, it was fawningly covered by NBC News, go figure. And also he got an appearance on Meet the Press on MSNBC. Ignore the fact that the audio and the video are kind of dislinked on this. I don't know why I got unlinked, but this is the way that I downloaded the clip. So it's not your eyes. You're not screwed up here. Here we go.
You are a self-described democratic socialist. Do you think that billionaires have a right to exist?
I don't think that we should have billionaires because, frankly, it is so much money in a moment of such inequality. And ultimately, what we need more of is equality across our city and across our state and across our country. And I look forward to work with everyone, including billionaires, to make a city that is fairer for all of them.
He wants to make the city fair. He wants to make sure that these things about hate crimes are concerned. Again, we talked about how the Justice Department is going out there and saying that they're going to defend people in churches. That sounds like it kind of aligns with what this guy's saying. It turns out he doesn't actually have to have any consistency across the board because he's going to resist the Trump administration. But the Trump administration is saying a lot of the same things that he is, at least talking about protecting voting groups that he wants to get. This guy got a lot of young Jewish people to vote for him, even though he's sort of like an anti-Zionist, free Palestine. He doesn't seem to have any guiding principles. Here he is talking about stopping people from danger and hate speech and using the police that he wants to defund to do police things to protect folks the same way you just heard Harmy Dillon doing over at DOJ.
And I know that Jewish New Yorkers, like Jewish Americans, are fearful in this moment of anti-Semitism. They're fearful, especially after the horrific attacks that we saw in Washington, D.C. and in Boulder, Colorado. And they're fearful also in conversations that I have heard myself about life in this city. I spoke to a Jewish man in Williamsburg not too many weeks ago who told me about the fact that he now locks the door that he used to close, that he used to keep open for years because of a fear of who may come in. I spoke to a friend of mine after October 7th who told me about going to his synagogue for Shabbat services and hearing the door open behind him and turning around with a tremor going up his back, not knowing who was walking in and what they wished for them. And ultimately, it's through the conversations I've had with Jewish New Yorkers that I have developed a proposal for the Department of Community Safety that would include an 800% increase in funding for hate crime prevention programs. Because ultimately, we cannot simply say that anti-Semitism has no home in this city or no place in this country. We have to do more than talk about it. We have to tackle it. And that's what we will do through this funding and through this commitment. We will root out bigotry across the 5 boroughs.
You're going to get rid of racism and bigotry in New York? I'm not sure the government is the proper entity for that. I don't think it actually has the power or the ability to. You wonder how someone like this can actually get voted to the top of the Democrat primary ticket? It's because people are dumb. This is not a New Yorker, this woman that you're about to hear from. She's been in New York for 3 years. For those of you that are from New York, you know that that's not a New Yorker. For those of you that are from Texas, you know that that wouldn't be a Texan. You've been here 3 years. Welcome to Texas. Shut your mouth and listen. This lady is a Gen Z person, and she's going to tell you that Mamdani represents a lot of the focus that Gen Z is interested in. I assume that they want to stop hate crimes and violence and danger, but we'd really not like to say it out loud. This might be, and the uptalk is priceless. This to me is why you get this kind of guy out there, because we have dumb people that are in our electorate. Overwhelmingly. Not smart enough to actually have the right to vote. And I'm going to tell you my final piece on this, because I had a little viral post that went out over the weekend, which proved to me that it's not just this lady in this age bracket. It's all age brackets and it's all people. in this country have the potential of being really, really dumb and snapping to judgments that they don't have the information to make. Anyway, let's enjoy a little bit of millennial or Gen Z uptalk, which is going to make us all want to puke.
Aside asking people what they think about the upcoming mayoral election, how long have you lived in New York?
For 3 years.
3 years. And who are you planning on voting for?
I'm planning on voting for Zoran.
Can you tell me why?
Yeah, I believe he has a lot of principles that I really believe in. I like where he stands on freezing rent, making public transit cheap and free, making buses free in particular, and I really like that he stands for a lot of Gen Z beliefs.
What would you say are the Gen Z beliefs?
I'm not going to disclose that because I think I want to keep some of those to myself, but, you know, happy to have a conversation in private.
Cool.
I'm totally happy to have like a conversation in private. Like, I don't want to disclose the Gen Z beliefs that I just said because like I don't actually know what they are. The Gen Z beliefs apparently are that you just have no idea. Like, how are you going to have free buses? You're going to now. This is the party that cries about the wrongs of slavery, right? How are you going to pay for the buses? You're going to require the labor of people to drive said buses and maintain said buses and put and build said buses, and it's going to be free? Is there anything that these people have ever seen that's free? It just doesn't really like, it's like a Gen Z thing. I want to headbutt these people. We need to just start walking away when people talk like that. That's part one. And then you find these like randomly common sense sort statements. I found this clip this morning before I went going, because I needed not like a cleanse. I needed to know that not everybody is dumb when they speak and they're young and younger than me. And that lady's obviously younger than me. I watched a great clip of a guy in his 50s, and he said it's really odd to like walk around and be like the old person. And if you're over the age of 40, then you start looking at everybody. You think that those people, you'd look at that person and you'd be like, this person could be a peer to me. They could hold a job in the same place where I work. They can vote in the same way that I can. They can raise children. They can make financial decisions. They can stand up at a meeting. They can run for office. They can have real power in society and in many ways are a peer. But they don't look at you and think, oh, yeah, you're a peer. And why is that? Because you have experience. And they don't. It's real clear. How about common sense, which used to be just sort of sucked into the existence of your everyday life? You were just overwhelmed by common sense before we had this internet era where people could react. Here's the problem with the viral post I had. I put a post out, which was clearly a joke over the weekend, that said it was Zoran Mamdani, the guy that we're talking about, this mayoral candidate, and it was a fake post that was generated by a fake Twitter account meme generator that said he was laughing at the destruction of the Challenger, and the post was dated 1986. And I kid you not, hundreds of people inform me that the internet didn't exist in 1986, that Twitter didn't exist in 1986, and that this guy didn't exist in 1986. And they were mad at me because they had no sense of humor. Because obviously that's the joke. The joke, and by the way, my quote was, if you guys listen to this podcast, you'll know exactly that I'm full of it right there. I said, this post is verified, true. It's verified true. It's verified true that a guy who was born in 1991 or 1992, who's 33 years old, tweeted about the Challenger in a negative way 7 years before he was born, 6 years before he was born in Uganda. Because that's the kind of thing that we would do, right? People were very incensed, and those people spanned all age brackets. And they were so happy to point out that you're wrong. It's the same people that will tell you that, well, communism's never been truly tried before. Like, we have like these Gen Z beliefs on these things. We control all these people because we have dumb people voting. And a lot of this stuff seems like it's been pushed out in the education program. And I had a nice chat with one of my neighbors the other day. We sat down and we talked about it. You can't tell me it's a black or white issue when you watch kids play. There's something that is happening in the schools and in these institutions that makes certain people believe that they're a victim. There are some things that are happening culturally. It took 100 years to absolutely destroy, devastate, and eliminate most black families. to the point where they were by default having higher marriage rates and more stability in their families because they had so little and they were trying to like climb out of poverty, that they knew that the right answer was staying together. And then sometime after the Great Society all kicked out there and the Civil Rights Acts and all the things that were set up under one guise, all it did was divide people. And like, then you start hearing some sane voices. Again, I told you I was going to give you kind of like a mental cleanse from the uptalk and the stupidity. Check this out. This man, he's a rapper, which I probably don't like his music if I had to guess, is saying something truly clear. And you know what? Maybe you have to leave the United States to look back in. It's one of the great reasons that you do a study abroad program. Nothing will make you want to live in America more than living in another country, in my experience. I never had any interest whatsoever in hanging out in another country after I lived there. I'm like, nope, I'm good. Look at this. Hold on. Before we go over to that. That's not what I'm trying to push. How about this button? Look, this is our chat right here. Our stream has failed over on Rumble, but it's working everywhere else. So you guys understand that's a Rumble problem, and I'm sorry that Rumble is screwed up. I actually had a couple of different instances. There may be some cyber attacks that are happening. The Iranians have said that they are going to continue to push on the United States cyber infrastructure. But at the end of the day, if you have a problem and you can't find what we're doing, like always, you can go over to YouTube, you can go to the other places. They're all streaming just fine. Folks on YouTube, as you guys can tell, you don't have that issue. Rumble is a really inferior platform in many ways. They did bring us to the dance, but man, it is a bummer. Okay, I want to play you this common sense because it is going to make your brain cleansed. You're going to feel better about it. And take a deep breath because not everybody is completely foolish. This is from a radio show, KBLA 1560, it looks like AM. Woman talking to this rapper, Jay French, who makes an awful lot of sense. Again, that common sense. It's there. It still exists. We just have to dig it out, and we need to broadcast more of this.
You consider yourself a black man?
I mean, I'm considered a black man, just like you're considered a black woman.
Right.
But we're just Americans.
You said don't call me black no
If
more.
we go to Africa right now, what they going to call us? Americans.
Black Americans.
They're going to call us Americans.
And so are you...
And they do call us Americans. When they're here, they call us Americans. Now, they call us certain things because we want to be called them. We're like, call me black.
Brother.
They want to call you black because they want you, because they think you want to be called black because you're just talking about Black Lives Matter and I'm black and I'm proud. Of course, they watching you and they're like, hey, that's a black person. But when they're talking amongst themselves, and I've heard these people, I've heard their conversations in Mexico and different people, they call us Americans no matter where we go. If we go to China, they call us Americans. It could be me and you standing with two other people we call white here, and they call us all Americans. You can call yourself Irish all you want.
Are you okay? So
but I'm gonna tell you now, you go to Ireland, they're gonna call you American. You don't fit in their culture. You're not a part of their neighborhood.
You're talking about Irish American.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but what is the advantage of erasing the term black and just calling us Americans? Why are you calling for that?
Because it brings us to appreciate us as an ethnicity instead of just as a it takes away the divide, the thing that we think is so different about us. You go to Puerto Rico, people are all kinds of colors. Blue-eyed, blonde hair, look like me, look like you, look like Miles. They look like everybody. They look like Cameron Diaz there. They look like everybody there. Mm-hmm. And but they call themselves with impunity, I am a Puerto Rican.
Let me back up. At the beginning, I said we have to know the difference between race, ethnicity, nationality, culture, religion, right? Right. So, and in your song, or I don't know if it's in the song or on TikTok, you say that American is an ethnicity.
It's our ethnicity. Yeah. It's a
to
new
me,
ethnicity.
Ethnicity is where are your people from?
This is our new ethnicity. Ethnicity, if you look up the word ethnicity, what comes back is beliefs, sometimes nationality. Sometimes
nationality is
behavior.
what your passport says. Well, ethnicity is where your people are from.
No.
That woman is so indoctrinated that she cannot leave it behind. That if she went anywhere else, forget about what you tell people you are. This is this like fantasy the left continues to have, where it's like, no, I define myself this way. Well, who gives a rat's ass what you define yourself as? What you are defined as is what people all around you agree. What they say behind your back when you're not listening. How do they describe you? This woman can't get past her own like egocentric, narcissistic, whatever that is. That indoctrination that says, this is how I am defined because I say it is so. We don't get to actually impose our will. That is called pride. We're in that Pride Month. It's the last day, thank God, of the Pride Month, right? We're going to stop seeing that. I actually have a story about Pride Month. This just happened. We'll do a Pride Month story in just one second. But all of that is to say, she can't get beyond the idea that other people have defined who you are. You're American when you go somewhere. I promise you, they'll call you a Yank or they'll call you an American if you go travel around Europe. And they know you by the way you look and by the way you dress. It doesn't matter what color skin you have. Black, brown, yellow, irrelevant. You carry yourself like an American, they know you're an American. They know exactly what that thing is. And this man is straight up. I love it. I actually like that. If we had more of that, which we did, by the way, have 30 years ago, it's probably the reason why Donald Trump is such a success with people across different areas, because he's not a conservative person. He's a 90s Democrat. And that was pretty sensible. And it wasn't really that offensive to things. There were things we didn't like about what they were doing. If you're really a conservative, if I had to go back then right now, I'd have qualms. But I'd have less qualms now than I probably would even have with the Republicans. Because even back then, they had a little bit of thing that common sense. Which is, like I said, I think that revolution is what... Didn't Donald Trump say we were going to have a common sense revolution? Here, a little touch on Pride. We'll get into the violence thing that happened in Idaho. I think that they are unrelated, but it is the same message. 2 people were shot outside of the historic Stonewall Inn following an NYC Pride March. They were teenagers. Terrifying, complete pandemonium. This is being covered by the New York Post. 2 people were shot near the historic Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village Sunday following the Big Pride, the Big Apple's Pride Parade. 16-year-old girl, 17-year-old girl. Doesn't that say an awful lot about a city when young people of that age, young girls, they're not protected, they're not safe, and they're going to get shot in a thing that's supposed to be celebrating what? Pride? Degradation? Hubris? Pride is one of the 7 deadly sins on purpose. Officers responded to a report of shots fired at the corner of an LGBTQ plus landmark bar, which was hosting Pride celebrations throughout the day and into the night around 10:15. Just a reminder, nothing good happens after 10 p.m. The more old you get, the earlier that hour moves and the more dad sort of grump you become. It wasn't clear if the shooting was targeted, whether it was a hate crime, whether it was related to Pride, whether it was just some a-holes that just pull triggers. All of this stuff is to say that you could be anywhere in America and your safety is your own responsibility. Your ability to be situationally aware, it's lessened when you're in a crowd, but it's also lessened when you're in the woods. And if you're just not aware of what goes on, you could become a quote unquote victim anywhere. And that's the horrible story that unfolded out in Idaho. If you were going to say, what is the opposite of New York City? I would say the woods that are north of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho might be pretty close to it. Kootenai County is a fairly large area. They've got a big lake. They've got all kinds of beautiful terrain. There's not very high population densities. Spent a couple of days driving in a couple different times up there. I've spent some time up in that area. I've got friends that are from the area. That's why I know how to pronounce it properly. I've talked to guys in the sheriff's department there. And yesterday, out of the blue, 2 Idaho firefighters were killed in an ambush. They eventually found the guy on a place called Canfield Mountain, which is pretty inaccessible terrain from everything I can get. And it sounds like he lured them up there by starting a fire. I've actually got the dispatch call. This was pulled off the Broadcastify website. So this is a screen grab. Bear with me on this one, but this was taken at 4:17. It looks like somebody grabbed this like as a screen grab off their phone. Listen to the absolute horror there. When I have buddies that worked in wildland fire, and oftentimes, especially in areas like that where you have the potential for grizzly bears and some things like that are like actual nature type threats, not a person. You wouldn't expect that, but you could expect that you might be cornered by some sort of an animal or something like that. They actually had guys that were assigned to shotgun details that while people were eating, somebody was manning a slug gun, because you just don't know. This is an awfully sad story. But again, it goes to show you that human nature in general is fallen, that bad things can happen wherever you are. And that it's not going to be specifically about whether you're an urban or rural. It's not going to be about whether you're a conservative person or you're not. Like, the nature of man is fallen. We all need more than what we've got here. This is a truly sad situation, and we'll read more about it. I am going to tell you something that occurred to me, because everything ends up going back into my little wheel well. When we find out what this story was, I will comment more on it. But what I will say before we get into speculation about what happened out there was a man that we interviewed on this podcast. His name is Zach Schofstall. And Zach was the SSRA, the senior supervisory resident agent, the top FBI agent in the Coeur d'Alene field office. Well, it's called a resident agency. It's a satellite office. He was the top agent out there. And he was removed over a pride thing. There was a pride parade in the park in 2022. There was a pride parade that had some sort of like gender ideology nonsense. And a guys like that were a-holes that are white supremacists and or white nationalists or whatever they want to call themselves showed up from Patriot Front. And they got out of a van, were immediately arrested, and then their phones were handed over to the FBI, and the FBI refused to do a search warrant on them because of what Zach said. The agent said, and by the way, I know one of the agents, I went to the academy with him, said that we're not going to do a search warrant because we don't have probable cause. You know that Constitution we talked about earlier? They believe in that. Unlike Ketanji Jackson Brown, unlike people that are on the hard left that don't get it, there is a Constitution. You have a right to not have unreasonable searches and seizures. And so those masked idiots that jumped out of the back of a U-Haul, they all got arrested. They all got charged with some nonsensical thing. And Zach was eventually removed from his job because the woman whose motivation was pride, Tracy Whelan, the assistant United States attorney, who was really interested in hate crimes, not real hate crimes, but made up ones like mean words in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. It resulted in Zach losing his job with the FBI. He was fired at the end of last year. He was fired in like September, I want to say, officially. Zach, who had a significant tactical background, go back and listen to the episode. Thanks, Rose, who's put that out there if you guys want to go find it. He was an FBI whistleblower. He sat down with me and Joe Altman. We did like 3 hours, stand up behind a countertop, just talking while we were at SHOT Show earlier. I guess it was earlier, what, this year? The crazy thing is that you can't tell me for sure that this situation, especially if we find out what sort of motivation was behind this shooter, couldn't have been prevented. Isn't that what the FBI keeps telling us? They prevent all the terrorisms? What I do know is that a good, tactically sound, capable operator, supervisor that had the respect of the people that work for him was not in that office when this thing went down. And I also found out that somebody didn't have the nuts to actually call the FBI SWAT team to get in there because they were SWAT operators who are backwoodsmen, who are previously experienced in working for the Department of Interior in those forests that were not called into action. And I'm not going to say too much more about it because I don't want to expose my friends that are working in these areas. But there are people that knew how to deal with stuff like that have been in that rough terrain. And that is a very heavily capable area. So eventually they did find this guy dead, but I do want to play you at least the dispatch because I want you to hear what that panic looked like. First of all, good for the firefighters for calling it in. They were able to evacuate as best they could. Good for them on that as well. This is an incredibly difficult situation, but it's a good reminder that when you live in a country that has a lot of freedom, you have to have a ton of responsibility, and there's probably got to be somebody, if you're going into the woods, that's ready to handle threats of bear or crazy man, whatever that man ends up being. And we don't know as far as what SWAT can handle, what they can't handle, what you should be able to handle. I do want to do that. I've had a request to kind of push more on the Stop the Bleed, and we will do more on that as well. At the end of the day, the classes are free. They're available online. You can find them on YouTube. You might be able to find them on Rumble. We've even done them on this podcast where we've gone through extensively on the March assessment. They were back in the early days when we were sitting in the trailer, and I walked through how to do this. This is not crazy hard stuff, but if you haven't seen that before, check out like a PJ Medcast or something to that effect with really solid emergency medicine. Find something that does March assessments, folks. If you are worried about being able to respond to something like this, MARCH, March, spell it out, March assessment. That's another big sort of common sense thing that you can know how to do, like handle your own emergencies. Anyway, here's the broadcast from Kootenai County.
Central BC 5, Central BC 5. BC 5 up 6. Some law enforcement right now, there's an active shooter zone. They're shot. BC 3's down, BC 1's down. Everybody's shot up here. Law enforcement, code 3 now up here. 551, 10 or 14 up here. Stop. Get out of the way. 10 or 14. Engine push 551. Do not come up here.
51 copies. Remaining staging. Central from 551.
551.
You get an ETA on life flight, please? What? You're busy. See what life flight has to offer. Go ahead and get started. Also, if you can do enact the MPI for the county, please.
Sorry, I couldn't copy. I was copying BC. This is at the upper parking lot. This is at the upper parking lot. Up on the dirt parking lot. We need law enforcement up here immediately. Law enforcement up here immediately. Copy upper parking lot. Immediately out, law enforcement.
All right, and there's a little bit more to it, but I think that's the relevant part here, so you guys get kind of a sense of what this is about. And if you've never listened to EMS traffic, if you've never listened to emergency dispatch traffic, that's what it sounds like. It's really chaotic. So whenever these things happen, if you think that you make a 911 call, you're talking to somebody and then like things start rolling because they understand they're getting mixed information. They're getting it over while they're driving. They're strapping on, additional body armor. They're getting a rifle prepared. They're grabbing a partner, putting him in the car. They're throwing out their cup of coffee that they were at lunch with or whatever. There's a lot of things that have to happen when the 911 call goes out. And if you're not familiar with what happens on the back end, there's a reason why we always tell you that you should be self-reliant and self-responsible. Those firefighters had nothing, like all they could do was cower. And they were pinned down. You can hear it. Good on him for getting the information out on the radio. He calls in for no one else to come up there. He's got people holding position. All of that is fantastic. That's a heads up move by people that are handling something. But that is a truly worst case scenario. And if you've never seen the difference between what's called cover or concealment, these are simple practices that you can teach your children. These are things that you learn in military basic that everybody should understand. Cover is something that stops bullets. Concealment is things that make it hard for you to see. You need both if you want to try to stop something from someone trying to kill you from an elevated position, which is apparently what happened. We don't know enough about the situation yet, but what you can do is you can take away that like you don't want to become a victim of something like that. That means you have to prepare yourself. Now, an ambush is effective no matter what. That's why they do ambushes. If you are not expecting to be attacked and then you are attacked, you have a narrow window that you are going to be incredibly vulnerable and then you can respond appropriately. Responding to contact is something that you're probably not going to know how to do if you haven't done it before. But good on these firefighters for calling it out as quickly as they did, getting the proper information, requesting law enforcement. You got people that are being held that were going to be rolling into it that could have also become additional victims. And you heard him say he wanted to instigate their MCI, their Mass Casualty Incident Command. So that could be that, or it could be a multi-command incident structure or something to that effect. MCI, in any case, he was letting people know that we need to have now a command structure that's going to handle this problem. And almost every firefighting crew and almost every law enforcement on the local end has gone through what's called NIMS, and NIMS is the National Incident Management System. So there's actually an idea after 9/11 on how we would handle this stuff. And the problem is, and the saddest thing is that we do that so infrequently that most places never know how to actually institute it. So they're always kind of making it up half-assed as they go. And they do an amalgamation of what they were trained on and like what the hell works right now. And all those things are just the nature of the beast. We do live in a free society, so you don't want to constantly have that police state sort of presence. At the same time, if you expect them to be perfect and execute everything exactly right, they won't. And how many people that are out there in law enforcement right now that are listening to this have ever trained on an active shooter scenario in a woodland area? Because I've never seen it done. So now you've got a new threat that you have to go out there and consider. Mostly you do them on schools and shopping malls and churches and large businesses, and you figure out like where somebody might be, and you go what's called direct to threat. You saw stuff like that happened in Tennessee where they did it correctly. And now you've got a whole new threat level to be able to do it. Like the threat is ever evolving. It can always change, and somebody can always have a new creative idea. I watched a Amazon truck that apparently exploded and caught fire in some sort of a battery incident that was in either Alexandria or over in Arlington, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. yesterday. It reminded me of the pipe bomber thing, that they didn't catch the guy. It also reminded me that we're all vulnerable because there's all these vehicles running around. And like, I've legitimately seen guys that we were following for terrorist activities that we thought was going to go do a terrorism active. Like he was going to go from interested to active kinetic terrorist acts. And the FBI told them, go ahead and stand and wait. And we did. We followed him around while he was in a flipping Amazon truck. No idea what was in the truck. So those threats can be anywhere. Anyway, it's not to scare people. It's to say, be personally self-reliant, carry things around like a med kit and so on. You can see that some of our sponsors actually sell them. So check it out if you're interested, if you don't have that stuff already, but just be aware. All right, I'm going to kind of finish up with some sort of interesting news, I think, of Trump was right sort of stuff. This was just stuff that happened over the weekend, and I don't want you to miss it because it did drop on a Friday, which is when the news would love to do this. Canada actually over the weekend rescinded what's called the digital services tax that they had. They had started taxing American industries, and they were trying to go out there and basically prove that that they could stand on their own and tell Donald Trump what they were going to do, and they were going to take money if they needed to. This is part of the trade war that's been going on. This is all the sort of tariff talk, which was a lot of people were sort of clutching pearls and freaking out. I'm going to show you that actually the indication is that Trump was right on this stuff. This is far less exciting than than shootings happening in the woods. But I think this is what the federal government's job is actually to do. Go out and negotiate things with foreign nations, trade deals, and so on and so forth. The national government, our federal government, is never going to be the one that saves you in the woods. Almost never. It shouldn't be. They shouldn't have the ability or the reach to go do that. You're going to end up with stuff like Ruby Ridge when that's the case, because they're proactively trying to do the wrong thing. This is the way that you're supposed to spend our time. Donald Trump was asked about it while he was sitting at the Resolute desk, and he had the following to say about digital services taxes and Canada, which actually after this tape, they ended up cowing and bending.
Go back to your social post on Canada specifically. Why are you deciding to end trade talks with Canada, and what rate are you looking to set?
So Canada put a charge on some of our companies, and Canada's been a very difficult country to deal with over the years. We hear Canada, we have a great relationship with the people of Canada, but it's been very difficult, and they put a charge, and they were a little bit early, we found out about it. So, and we have all the cards, we have every single one. We don't want to do anything bad, but they have, economically, we have such power over Canada. I'd rather not use it, but they did something with our tech companies today trying to copy Europe. They copied Europe. It's not going to work out well for Europe either, and it's not going to work out well for Canada. They were foolish to do it. So I said we're going to stop all negotiations with Canada right now until they straighten out their act.
And of course, he was correct in that, because then the Canadians came back to the table and they rescinded this digital services tax, and they went back and resumed the trade talks. So all of that's kind of funny. Again, the media has been trying to push this sort of thing, which is why they're cheering on almost all things that are, even if they're antithetical to what Americans actually want, they're cheering them on left and right. And they're like, oh, yeah, this is what we want. They also were fear-mongering as best you can. You guys remember that. If any of you guys have been watching the stock market, you're going to see in just a second that this is kind of funny, because I got another headline to refute this April broadcast. This is like April 3rd, I want to say, of this year, where you had CNN and others that were claiming that basically doom and gloom and your retirement account was going to be wiped out and it was all over for you because Donald Trump did the very bad thing of tariffs. Hopefully some of you bought at the bottom of the curve the way that I did. I didn't buy a lot, but I did put my retirement, last year's max, the $7,000 for each of us in. And guess what? Yeah, we're all back. We're back to where we started. If not, again, we're higher in most places. This was CNN making their predictions that it was all over. And of course, they got their guy Kramer, who's like you could pretty much bet against whatever that dude says almost every time that I see. He's got a lot of reversals. I guess if you're a prognosticator, you're always going to be wrong a lot.
Out front tonight, the breaking news, a wipeout. $2.5 trillion today gone in the rout on Wall Street in response to Trump's trade war against 185 countries. And right now, as you look around this ripple around the world, it's like a tsunami rolling around, markets overseas mostly all in the red. And Trump today, meantime, was on the golf course. His Doral Golf Club in Florida hosted the Saudi-owned Live Golf Tournament. So that's where he was. While he was on his way, he was asked about the crisis on Wall Street.
A lot of people were upset today about how their 401ks were doing. Do you have investments when you look at
I think our markets are going to boom.
Of course, the S&P 500 today, as I mentioned, lost $2.5 trillion alone. Now, America's economy, before Trump made any of these announcements, started talking about all these tariffs and the way he was in recent weeks, had a lot going for it.
I mean, I thought that President Trump won in part because he realized that there was so much inflation. Well, they just gave you far more inflation. That was a shame. And now you got people hoarding. Forget that. I mean, I'll see you at Costco on Saturday. I love Costco, but
S&P closed at a record high, making a sharp comeback after stocks plunged on April 3rd, 2nd and 3rd, whatever that Liberation Day. The broad-based stock index, the S&P, rose 32 points or 0.5% to close at 6173, surpassing a previous all-time high in all of history. It jumped roughly 24% since dropping sharply in the days since Donald Trump announced his Liberation Day tariffs on April the 2nd. The NASDAQ went up another 105 points. Just another reminder that the so-called experts, they end up eating their words a lot of the times. This is what the federal government ought to be doing, as far as I can tell. Should be handling this. What it shouldn't probably be doing is your retirement account. You guys should take responsibility for that in the same way we're talking about taking responsibility for your safety. So I found this to be kind of a fascinating little article here, which is that half of all private sector workers in the United States have no access to a retirement plan. This study finds Americans are continually encouraged to sock away money in a 401k or other retirement plans to ensure a comfortable, if not cushy, time in their later years. That less than half of all workers in the private sector have access to one of these employer-sponsored retirement plans. 56 million workers across the U.S. are unable to save via retirement plans through their jobs. And while these employees can, in principle, save their own money, many are forced to prioritize putting food on the table and paying bills in the present over building a nest egg for the future. And they mention, of course, 401ks because they don't want to talk about the thing called an IRA, which all of you guys can access. And every single person who is a private sector employee, or if you're self-employed the way that I am, you can do that yourself. Of course, the argument is that the government should come in and be the one that does it. And that's the argument why we need to have a Social Security program, which is probably the least efficient way that we could invest anything. You know, where you have tens of thousands of employees that don't want to answer their phones, that are responsible for doing a mediocre job of taking your money and then lending out to other government agencies and basically writing an IOU that doesn't actually get returns. This is the opposite of what the founders were expecting with our government. Social Security is the argument because private sector workers don't have access to 401ks. Guess what? All of you can put money away. Figure out what you don't need. And a lot of people, we had a long conversation. We continue to have these conversations with people. Whenever somebody says that, like, you know, the government needs to come in and save them, all you got to realize is our family went 14 months without a paycheck. Why? Because we made decisions that insulated us against that. If you don't want to be owned by your federal government or your federal government job or your private sector job, if you want to be able to make hard decisions, which are incredibly hard based on principles that you hold, then you got to stick with them and you got to do things that insulate you in advance. You can prepare and then you don't have to repair later. Half of private sector employees, all of private sector workers have access to using an IRA because it's built into the tax code. Why these people don't think that they have access to it or why they limit this particular CBS Money News. It just shows you that we have a deeply dishonest press, whether they're lying about what tariffs are going to do or that things are going to rebound or whatever else. They don't actually have the best interest. They're always advocating because this is the picture. If you're looking on the screen right now, it says Social Security Administration and the federal building in New York is the thing that they have as their head picture. Putting it in your head, private sector workers don't have access to some way to save money and therefore Social Security is the answer. Social Security might as well be the same guy who's talking about doing buses. It's the worst way to manage money. It's the least efficient and is the furthest away from you. Because what effect does your vote have on Social Security? Almost none. And of course, they mix this stuff into the big, beautiful bill as well. So anyway, just a little awareness of what's going on. I'm going to give you one last little story because it's good. And then we'll do something that's funny because why not? I found this local news out of CBS. A child fell from a Disney cruise ship. In Fort Lauderdale. And right after she fell off the fourth deck, the dad jumped in to go get her. Because that's the real answer. For me, it was like, got it. Okay. There's a TikTok video of it, shows the dad treading water with the daughter in his hands. If you're a dad and you haven't practiced holding on to one of your kids and keeping them, especially if you have kids that can't swim very well, if you haven't practiced holding them up above so you could hold on to them for long enough for rescue to get you, if you had to go into the water and get them, what are you doing? Get to work. I actually I literally practice this with my infant. I practice this with my little toddler. I practice with my smaller kids. I can hold 2 kids up. It would suck for me. It'd be a bummer for a long time, but I could do it. And you have to do that. This dad went in, he dove in right off the deck. He followed right after his kid. I don't know why his kid fell off. They don't know why. That's what dads are supposed to do. Because you can't wait for the government to come save you. The government's not your dad. That's the lesson of today's show, which most of us used to know in the same way that most of us knew that we were all just Americans and we didn't need any of the hyphens. Kid goes in the water, you go in the water. That's what you signed up to do. So anyway, don't wait for someone to come save you in all these things. And it's unfortunate if you find yourself in that scenario. Hopefully you never let yourself get in that situation again. Doesn't matter whether you're in New York at a damn pride parade and something goes bad, or if you're sitting there and you're wondering like, holy crap, I'm a wildland firefighter. Maybe we should pack an AR in one of our bags so we at least are not pinned down forever and we don't have an opportunity. Because there's nothing more helpless than hoping somebody else is going to come save you. It's the worst. It's absolutely the worst. You don't want that. All right. How about something funny? We need that. Before we do, if you're watching and you're having problems over on YouTube, on Rumble, you can always join us on YouTube. We appreciate that for all of the YouTube watchers. Folks, if you're watching, give us the thumbs up. Give us a like on any of those platforms. You can't do a like over on Spotify, but you can give us a 5-star review if you want. All you got to do is click 5 stars. It takes nothing. YouTube.com/@KyleSeraphin, Rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. There's no @ in that one. And then locals. We've gotten more people signing up on locals. You guys can sign up for free. We'd love it if you would. You get access to all the articles that I use every day, so I quote them. If you guys want to go and check them out at KyleSeraphin.com. That's the locals thing. And lastly, on Spotify, it's KyleSeraphinShow.com. Quite easy to go and type that in, and it'll just bring up the website. You don't even have to download the app if you don't want. I'm going to give you something for fun. This is a story about probably not your uncle, but maybe like one of your fantasy uncles if you are an Italian. This is just a silly song that I found, and it made me laugh. It's kind of catchy, kind of reminding you that some foods are not as healthy as other foods. This is a dude in a tracksuit singing about eating pizza.
Baby, let me introduce myself, cause I'm a true paisan. Let me get a slice of pepperoni, extra parmesan. Let me get a chicken cutlet, peppers, and prosciutto parm. Let me get it on whole wheat though, trying to watch the gut.
Now I've been dug in food courts, I got the sweet green nap. I stopped seeing my Nona, she feeds me too much crap. I asked her for a kiwi, she brings me arancini, some meatballs and linguine. That's why she never sees me, cause I got
increased heart disease, type 2 diabetes, clog my arteries from all this meat and cheese. I sweat through my sheets, full on deli meats. I can't see my knees from all this meat and cheese. If I could quit, I would. My doctor says that I should, but it tastes so fucking good, and I can't live without it. Increased heart disease, type 2 diabetes, clog my arteries from all this meat and cheese.
It's dumb. That's what I want New Yorkers to be, and not voting for freaking socialists. So there you have it. Also, the tracksuits. Let's bring it back. Some of these guys need to be continuing to wear them. God bless all of you. Hope you have a fantastic day. Thanks for joining us. We're only going to do 3 shows this week, so we're going to be off on Thursday and Friday to celebrate Independence Day. This country, which is a great country, I'm going to try to do some things with my kids. So I hope you guys can appreciate that. Hope you guys also are making some plans. My wife just told me we need to figure out something to do. So we're going to do that. So anyway, you got today, you got tomorrow, got the next day. If you're like, hey, I really need some more Kyle Seraphin show. We are now over 600 episodes deep. Go back and watch some of the original ones we did, particularly the interviews. Some of those interviews, although they were technically not very impressive, we had some really neat guests telling us some really interesting things. And there's dozens and dozens and dozens of them. So we'll check you out that. Anyway, have a great rest of your day. God bless you. And we'll see you again tomorrow. Adios for now.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram @Kyle Seraphin.